Welcome back to another episode of Apostate of Mind, where we take a critical and scholarly approach to religion and its sacred writings. I'm Mark Peralta, an ex-evangelical pastor and learner of the Bible. And today I have back with me Dr. Kipp Davis, where we're doing an in-depth analysis of both the research and Sean McDowell's video with Scott Stripling on the subject of the whole Mount Ebal, alleged inscription. And so, folks, we do want to appreciate you coming back here. Be sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode of Apostate of Mind. And without further ado, here's Dr. Kipp Davis.
Now, he does mention that perhaps it's resembling this ancient practice, forgive me for butchering pronunciation, the Boustrophedon?
Boustrophedon? It doesn't, though.
But
and
I
we'll
wanted
talk
to
about
ask you,
that.
like, what is that exactly? I mean, I've seen it.
There are various. So now Hebrew, as we understand it, is written from right to left on horizontal lines. In antiquity, the earliest evidence that we have from the proto-Hebrew inscriptions that we do have indicate that there wasn't an established right to left horizontal standard for Hebrew. You have a couple of different things taking place. Some texts seem to go top to bottom, the lines like that. Okay. I think you write Chinese like that, right? Mm-hmm. You're in columns as opposed to lines or rows. And some of them actually go from left to right. And then there is this this structure which is called I think it is Boustrophedon. But Boustrophedon is literally the meaning of that is as the ox plows. So that's following a structure where it goes left, then right, then left, then right, or I'm not sure if we have these up and then down and then back up and then down. Importantly, and this is very important, you're still situating your characters in order in a line. No matter which direction you're going, that is not what we have on this tablet. It's entirely unique in that respect, which is a big reason why scholars have said this is nonsense.
And from the examples that I've seen, I mean, it would require you, like, if this was the tablet that you start reading one line and then you flip it and then you read that line and then you flip it again and you keep on having so that you can follow along. But what's happening here, it's more like a spiral kind of arbitrary.
It's a jumble. Path. It really is. It's very arbitrary. Now, I think maybe the argument that they would forward in response to that is that, well, because this is a curse tablet and because it's not intended to be read. Remember, you wrote the curse on the tablet, you folded it closed with the intention that it would stay closed. Nobody's ever going to read it. Because of that, and the significance of these, what we call apotropaic objects, these amulets or magical objects, which include curse tablets. They also include like things that you wear on your body to protect you from evil spirits and stuff. This is where the phylacteries and the tephilim and the mezuzot kind of developed out of this practice, right? Uh-huh. Of wearing text objects on your body as a form of divine protection or divine blessing. This is what
spirits and things like that.
Yeah, this is what the silver amulets that were discovered at Kipp are. Like they're amulets. They're these protective texts. So the important thing is not to be able to read them, right? The idea is that there's something inherently magical about the writing, about the script, about the text itself. So all you have to do is just get it on there. So we have examples like, the Kipp amulets are like that, but you can still read them. right? They're not a jumbled mess. It's clear that, you know, that the text is still going in the right direction, and the letters are following one another. We have examples of so-called tefillin from Qumran. We got like 20 of them, and they're kind of like that, right? Like they're very they're tiny. The writing is incredibly small on them, and there's no word spaces. Words will just continue from the end of, like, in the middle of a word, you'll have word breaks that continue on to the next line. They're very hastily, sloppily done, and the priority is just to get the text on the object. Again, nobody's going to read it, right? So I think the argument, the counter response that Stripling and his team would mount is, well, because this is a curse object, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that the it's written in order. And I suppose conceptually that works. Theoretically, that seems like it makes sense. The problem is we have nothing like it. Nothing.
You're here because you got nothing. You got nothing in court. You don't got the bookkeeper. You got nothing. Nothing. And if you were a man, you would have done it now.
Nothing anywhere. Like it is a one of a kind object in that regard.
So it's probable, but as anything is probable, but very unlikely because there's no.
You mean possible?
Possible, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say very, very remotely. Very, very remotely possible, right? But it just, there, especially given that nobody but Stripling and his team can see letters on the thing, seems like there are much better explanations for what it actually is.
Where does that stand? So,
sorry, were you ready to continue?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Other people can start weighing in, experts and non-experts, to see what they think.
Yeah, that's a good question. We have made some available. What I would like to do is get a website up that has all of this information so that, you know, everybody can have access to the same stuff that we had. Now, we had the benefit of having the scientists from Prague also consulting with us about helping us learn how to read tomographic scans as well. But, you know, we had a number of things that have come up. First of all, we separated from Galil as soon as the publication came out. And then Peter got cancer. And so he has been recovering from cancer, and this has put us behind. He's now, I think, sufficiently recovered that we can get back to this. We would like to get back to the tablet, which is in Israel, and do some additional scans and make these available.
Good luck with that, eh?
Right. Especially now.
Yeah,
there's a war going on in Israel right now. So, you know, I hesitate to put a date on it, but I know that it's important, and we will do our best.
That makes sense. Now, when Rolston came on, he suggested kind of a team split. Is this Galil that you're referring to? And what was that over? Why did he split? And do you guys view things differently now? Did he retract some of his claims? No.
Galil believes that he saw everything, that all 48 letters, and that he knows exactly what it says. Peter and I were more cautious and said, this is what we think it might say, and we're not sure of all the letters. And it clearly can be read other ways. So once the publication came out, I just notified Gershon we remain friends, but that, you know, we're not going to continue our collaborative project working with him.
All right, let's pause it there. Because we need to talk about Gershon Galil. Now, I don't know anything about the nature of the split they had with him, so I can't weigh in on that. But I can tell you a little bit about Gershon Galil, and this is another one of the reasons why many epigraphers and many scholars are just highly, highly, highly suspicious about the text on this object, even if there's anything there. So he's been an archaeologist in Israel for a very, very long time at the Hebrew University. He's done a lot of exceptional work, but more recently, a number of things that he has published have been pretty out there. I'm just going to pull up one of the items to share it with you, and that is this one here. So back in when was this? So this article, so back in 2010, So this is it? Do you have it on your screen?
Yes.
Now? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So this is an object that was discovered during excavations at the Gihon Springs in Jerusalem, and you can see it is a man-made object of some sort. It kind of looks like the corner of a box, a stone box of some kind, and you can see on this picture. I'll zoom in on it for you. You can see like all these markings, right? So Galil is convinced when he sees this that is text. So he takes it and he sits down with it for again, it was a while. It was at least a year, maybe it was a couple of years that he sat down with it, and he's like, I've got it. I've cracked the code. This is a text. And this is what he said the reading was. And here, I'll just read from the article. The stone block, dating to sometime around 3,300 years ago, bears the following 63-letter proto-Canaanite early alphabetic text. So just like the curse tablet from Mount Ebal, right? Proto-Canaanite early alphabetic. As submitted by Galil, here's his translation. Cursed, cursed, you will surely die. Cursed, cursed, you will surely die. Governor of the city, you will surely die. Cursed, you will surely die. Cursed, you will surely die. Cursed, you will surely die. Now, it sounds quite familiar, I would think, right, Mark? So it sounds exactly, it's very, very similar, right? It's a curse object that has been deciphered by Galil, and it features this proto-Canaanite early alphabetic text. Here, I'll show you. This is his drawing. He did the drawing for the Mount Ebal inscription, and this is what he came up with for this item. Now,
was this peer reviewed by other epigraphers?
Yeah, I believe this was published, and the reaction has been exactly the same. Almost all scholars looked at this and said this is nonsense. In fact, as far as I am aware, most scholars have suggested that these marks on the inside of this box are just striations created by a carving tool. It's not text. It's just wear from the chiseling process of making this object. So we can stop sharing at that point.
You can almost see the right angle, perhaps on the inside.
You totally can, right? And I think that's actually important. Let's bring that back up, because I think this is important. I'm happy that you pointed that out, right? Yeah. Like you can
it's more
see,
stressed in the corner.
Yeah. Like you can see this, right? Yeah. The way that the chisel has been working this stuff out. And then all the this stuff.
I was going to say the majority of the carvings, they seem to resemble, if I'm looking at this the right way, perhaps a right-handed person. Because a lot of them seem to be coming in from the upper right corner towards the left, which would make sense if the person's right-handed chiseling on the inside.
That's true. Yeah, I'll take your word for it. And
I can't imagine if this was like Bronze Age, that they would have had like really sharp tools per se.
Well, I don't know about that. But one of the things that I mean I think is really odd here is that, like, why on earth you would add a script here? And the fact that, like, you can see it's broken, right? It's just a corner of something, and yet Galil managed to see an entire text. Like, the text that he presented is a complete text. Like it doesn't have, there's no what we paleographers and epigraphers called lacunae, or missing portions of the text that have been broken off or damaged. So it's all just so sketchy here. If you remember, and maybe you can bring it up, but one of the things that just absolutely floored me when they did the press conference and announced the object originally way back in 2020 or 2021 or whenever that was, at the Lanier Theological Library, Galil actually came out and said that based on what he was seeing of these 48 letters on the curse tablet, he said the writer, you could tell, was a genius. He was a leader. He was a charismatic. It had to have been Joshua. Couldn't have possibly been anyone else. It's 48 letters, and repeated letters, right? Like there's actually, now this is important. I'm going to bring this back up. All right. So this is the paleographical chart that Galil made of the object. So this is his rendition of all the letters. You'll notice while there's 48 letters, there are only actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 individual letters. There's 9 alephs, there's 4 hays, there's 8 vavs, 2 yods, 3 lameds, 3 mems, 12 reshes, and 7 tavs. Now, the reason why Galil keeps seeing curses all over the place is because the word in Hebrew for curse is arur, which is formed by aleph, resh, vav, resh. Like, look at the massive overrepresentation of aleph, vav, and resh on his chart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's simple. It's a simple sort of letter. They, these. It's a line with a loop on the top for the vav. It's what's called the bull's head. But you'll notice there's just no consistency here at all in terms of how they're formed on the aleph on the top. Right. The resh is very similar actually to the vav. Mm-hmm. But these are relative. I would suggest these are relatively simple marks, which would be very easy to misconstrue from just striations on a stone that you've been staring at endlessly for weeks or months, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It makes so much sense to me why he sees why he thinks he sees something, and then what specifically he thinks he sees. There's such a consistency between these two objects, which remarkably both, like the two of them, would they're monstrously important finds if they're legitimate.
Right.
And for both of them to be, discovered and deciphered by the same archaeologist, and seeing the same kind of thing and not managing to convince anyone else, I don't know. Yeah. Seems kind of obvious to me.
All right.
Fight, Skaha.
And I'd like a more open, collaborative approach.
Okay, fair enough. Are there other epigraphers who are convinced? Are there any other mainstream epigraphers who agree with you and would take a different assessment than, say, Ralston and Mayer? And if so, who are they?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yesterday, a mainstream epigrapher, I got an email from someone. I don't know if he wants his name out there or not, but I've been contacted by many scholars. The problem is, are we going to limit this expertise to epigraphers and paleographers only? Or
so I just wanted to say here, I bet when you were in high school, Mark, you probably had a really hot girlfriend that lived in Canada too, Ray?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was. I mean, I'm not trying to be too critical, but it sounds like he just sort of shifted the question over to, has anyone contacted you? When the question was, does anyone support findings.
Right?
And
like,
I've been contacted by a lot of scholars, but what have they said?
if there's somebody out there that supports that has come on board and said, I agree with your reading, then why haven't they said anything publicly? And why can't you name them? Right? Like it's published. If this is published material and somebody agrees with you, I see no reason at all why they would be concerned about. I don't know. Maybe they're looking at the climate of their peers. Honestly, this just sounds like a very bad excuse.
It allows us to chime in because Meir is not an epigrapher. I'm not an epigrapher. Yet we're Mazar is not an epigrapher. So we're reliant somewhat upon these people. And so I have the 3 epigraphers on my team, and we have the peer reviewers who reviewed this. We have the scholars mentioned in the article. And yes, lots of people have contacted me expressing support. I haven't asked them for permission to use their names. So I'll refrain from doing that right now. We'll let it play out.
Girlfriend in Canada.
And the peer reviewers, I'm assuming they're from the Heritage paper, the journal.
Well, they would have sought out the peer reviewers, right? And that paper is like there's a few things going on in there, and you have to wonder what they would have consulted, or how am I trying to put this? I guess the criteria that they would have put together, right? For selecting reviewers. Like there's a lot of science in that article, so clearly they needed some scientists who understood the technology to review the article. But like, how many actual epigraphers who specialize in Northwest Semitics did they contact to look at the article? No idea, right? And this is one of the problems. This is the way peer review works, right? It's blind. So, I mean, we have to take them at their word that they did a good job. But I mean, there's a lot of crap that makes its way through peer review. It's not a guarantee that the work is good. It controls for an awful lot of stuff, and I don't want anybody hearing me saying that peer review is no good. I'm just saying it's got limitations and it doesn't always work. And I think this is an instance where it probably just didn't work.
Okay, so are there behind the scenes, I guess I somewhat hesitate to ask this, but are there certain political dynamics, who comes out and takes sides professionally? You don't have to say what they are, but when people land on this, are there risks professionally that are greater to support it versus critiquing it? Or is the field just like, hey, we want to know the truth, we're putting proposals out there, we're willing to critique it? How does that work in this field as fairly as you can give someone from the outside like myself an assessment of this?
Oh, if only it were as you describe it. There's always problems with challenging the status quo. I think that Agatha Christie, who was married to an archaeologist, referred to it as blood on the carpet.
Wow.
When you start getting into academia in this field. So the stakes are high.
Okay, so what would you say to evangelical scholars, some of whom I've interacted with just a handful since doing a couple of the interviews, who hold a high view of Scripture but are just critical of the conclusions published in the article? Like
so many, like lots, and that's the thing that I think people can take away from this, is that there are just so many scholars on many sides of the issues in Levantine archaeology and biblical history and the text. Many on multiple sides who have come out and said this is nonsense. And many evangelical scholars have come out and said this is nonsense.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
they want it to be true. They'd love to support it. It challenges potentially the documentary hypothesis, like you said.
I wanted to pause there because I'm like,
yeah, right.
Really?
So,
really?
Well, this is a claim that he made.
Wow.
In that first video that he did with Sean. And this is ridiculous because the way Stripling framed it in that first video was because you have the word El right next to the word Yahoo or Yahweh, this defeats the documentary hypothesis. This is how he framed it, because in his imagination, I guess, the documentary hypothesis functions on this idea that, there were these two different names for God, either El or Yahweh, and the two never met. prior to the construction of the Pentateuch, which is patently ridiculous. And I mean, even in his translation of the text, he has to know how ridiculous this is, because he translated the word El, as one naturally would, as God. It's just, yes, it's the name of the high God in the Canaanite pantheon, but it's also just the generic word for God.
Yeah, just like you have many cases of Yahweh Elohim all over the place.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's called that frequently. Right? So it was just such a nonsensical, stupid suggestion in the first place. I'm happy that Sean brought it up again, and I sure hope that expression on Scott's face is communicating how he's feeling in the moment about having to wade through this again, because
that looks like contempt.
It was dumb. It was just dumb.
But are just holding back and reserved. What would be your challenge or your thoughts or your message to fellow evangelical scholars?
Well, I can understand people being there. I would say keep your powder dry. I think after reading our article fairly, one should come away saying this is plausible, at least. They did have 3 epigraphers who saw this. This is what they think that it says. And give us a chance to put out more scans, more images to make those things available. So some may already be inclined to not want to agree with us. Others may be inclined the other way, and many might be in the middle. I would say keep your powder dry. These things unfold, and there will be more data that'll be coming out for them to make it.
I guess I haven't exactly kept my powder dry, have I?
Okay, so help me understand as we look at the letters that are on the tablet. They look like there's no discernible pattern. There's different sizes, there's different directions. Why would there be no discernible pattern? And are there any other inscriptions you're aware of that have that kind of non-discernible pattern?
Yeah, that's how it is in the late Bronze Age. You take this proto-alphabetic script, say from Setabet el-Hadim in the Sinai and other places, the Wadi al-Nazm, and that's what they're like. They can be read top to bottom, or they can meander. It can be Boustrophedon as the ox plows, which Rolston points that out also. So that's how they are. So like Sinai 375a, Sinai 361, the more recent Lachish Lyscombe is meandering. It goes up and down from top to bottom if they've got the reading right on that.
Does it? So I took a look at it.
Well, it does. It goes. The letters are. It does. It basically goes right to left, and then it flips over. So the 2 lines are, one line is upside down, right?
Right.
And then it goes from like, if you're looking at it this way, then it goes from left to right. So it does do this. It does go this way and then this way, or but important. I mean, there's a couple of important things here, right? There's still a discernible pattern.
Yeah,
the letters are still in a line, and they're following a pattern.
Yeah, and I just took issue with the verb meandering. I don't think that's
absolutely. It definitely doesn't meander, and I think that's you probably have the other two as well, right? He mentioned 2, so that's the comb, and you can see they've numbered them, right? from right to left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on the bottom. Then it flips over, and then you've got on the top the remaining letters. So, but importantly, and again, you still have lines of letters. It's not going all over the place.
Right.
It is following this very concrete pattern. Do you have the other two? I've got them if you don't. Sinai 361 and Sinai 375. So these importantly also don't meander. Maybe here, why don't we look at mine? And these are reconstructions, which are easier to see.
Oh, I have these too.
Oh yeah. That's good. Yeah. So like if you look at this, the text here, and it looks it can be deceiving because what you have, the black lines represent the proto letters, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have green Hebrew characters that are beside them. But when you're looking at it that way, it does kind of look like a jumbled mess, right? But not really. Like if you took away the green letters, there is a clear pattern. The script here goes from right to left in columns. So top to bottom on the right, you read from the right top down to the bottom. Then you go back up to the top of the second column and read from the top to the bottom. And then the third column, top to bottom. Fourth column, top to bottom.
Yeah. And that follows suit with Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Yeah, exactly. And so that of course, sense. Right? The alphabet developed from Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Right.
So, and then do you have the other one? 375. So here, again, this is not a meandering text. You have the text going from bottom to top on the left-hand side. And then you've got a name that goes from the top left, and it kind of comes down into the center of the object. This is the closest thing you can get to, I would say, the what they've proposed on the curse tablet. But even this, you're still dealing with lines of letters. It's not a random jumble like they proposed on the curse tablet. Right? It's very different.
Let's bring it back.
It's just very different. No text does this. And it's another super important point here, right? Like, yeah, in some of these primitive inscriptions, you definitely get some variation in letter size, but nothing like this. Like, it's crazy. Some of the differences, like if you look, there's the Hays are the easiest ones to find because they look like little men. And if you look on the left-hand side there, sort of close to the bottom, there's a tiny little man. And then like right in the center, there's like this gigantic man, right? Like this makes no sense.
It's a David and Goliath font.
It's a prophecy.
Yeah, it's prophetic.
Certainly meandering as well. And that's the way they did it in the late Bronze Age.
Okay, interesting. All right, so where this debate rests,
so I think it's fair to say that in the late Bronze Age, early Iron Age, with these proto texts, with these proto scripts, they had variety in terms of how they structured texts, but they did not meander. They followed an unsurprising and expected structure, right? A discernible structure.
Help me kind of frame this for folks. Is number one, there's obviously questions about dating. There's obviously questions about location. And then there's questions about, are letters even there? And folks like Rolston, who have been more critical, have said they certainly don't buy the 48. You and your team originally differed over exactly how many are there, but took a more larger view that there are letters there. But then there's the follow-up question. If there are letters there, what do they say, and why, in fact, would they even be significant? So I want people to see the layers of the debate that are actually going on.
No, that's fine. We're talking about, do we have the oldest example of early Hebrew? Does it have the name Yahweh? Peter van der Veen has, as recently as yesterday, said that he thinks that maybe there's something more like 15 to 20 letters. He's, we can't be confident of the 48, but the core of the reading is still there. Yahweh is there.
That feels like a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, and if anything, isn't that the scholar that's in the paper?
Yes, that's one of the authors of the paper. So he's now much more critical. I would say if he's not if he's seeing 15 and not 48, that's a lot less. That's far fewer. Mm-hmm. So I'll point out at this point, one of the big criticisms of Rolston and Meyer was the failure of Stripling and his team to abide by best practices for publishing editions of texts. And they were very critical on this point, and it's a super important point. We saw the tomographic scans that they made available of the object, and we saw Galil's paleographical chart. When I do paleographical charts, what I'm doing is I am actually snapping like photographs of individual letters and removing the background from them. I tend to touch them up a little bit just to provide clarity, and then I use that as a basis for my if I do a hand drawn reconstruction. That's how I do it. So Galil's paleographical chart was just his drawings of the letters. He didn't include the photographs. And then even where in the article he provided like representations of the letters on the object, they were drawn. And the reason for this is because you can't make anything of the actual scans themselves. So this was a big problem for Rolston and Meyer. This idea that you're just providing us with your interpretation of the letters and not a clear photographic record, and the stuff doesn't match. Here's what they say. There's a marked difference between the hand copies and the photos, which should be the basis for the latter. Within the field of epigraphy, if scholars cannot prove their drawings and readings based on published photos, such readings are considered unreliable or very uncertain. The greater the difference between the photos and hand copies, the more problematic and unreliable the interpretation must be regarded as. In this case, the putative 48 letters are simply not present. They go on to say, for us, what we see in these photos are not letters, but random scratches, striations, pitting, and indentations. Mm-hmm. These features are all very consistent with the compositional nature of lead and standard depositional archaeological processes. Lead is, after all, a soft metal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very soft.
Yes.
And I also wonder, like, how much, and I'm not familiar with tomographic scanning, but
I'm not either.
It sounds like it's similar to like if you ever looked at an MRI where you like
it's layers, right? Like it's taking images of layers from top to bottom of an artifact, and they had a neat animation that they included with the article that they published, Stripling and his team, which showed like the layers from top to bottom, and I watched it like 15 times, and I still could not.
Would you say that perhaps like the depths of the the indentations where they're all at the same
see that's at the same level, right? Depths. Like I think that's part of the argument that they're attempting to make, is that because they're at slightly different depths in the object. That's why they're so hard to see. But I just don't buy it. Like it just feels way too speculative to me. And again, I think this is just such an important point that Rolston and Meyer make, that the letters just do not match even close to the photographs that they've provided. And with that, it's impossible to just go ahead and accept their explanation for what's going on.
Curses there, and those are more clear. And so in a follow-up publication, I think we will zero in on those, because that's really the crux of the matter. Do we have writing? Is it proto-alphabetic? And do we have uniquely Hebrew words like Yahweh? One thing that is brought out, by the way, by Rolston and Mayer.
Now, Rolston made a really good point here as well in his interview with Sean. I think he repeats it in the article, but I don't remember offhand. So the word Yahweh, the consonants Yod He Vav. So there's no guarantee that this is the name Yahweh either, right? Okay. Like this could be a verb, in which case it's not a unique Hebrew word. We just don't know.
Gotcha. I think this is when he talks about the mater lectionis.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Is that we're saying that El and Arur and Mot are uniquely Hebrew. We never said that. That's another straw man argument. Go back and read our Heritage Science article. So
they're not making, I don't think they ever made that charge though either, did they? That Stripling's team suggested that those words are uniquely Hebrew. I never understood that from them.
Mm-hmm. I think he's the one that makes the case that it's a Hebrew. It's a Yahweh form of Hebrew.
Well, the argument is that because Yahweh is there, right. And if it is Yahweh, then you could identify that as a Hebrew text, as a not just a general Canaanite text. Like that's often how we distinguish inscriptions as Israelite versus just broader Canaanite. Oftentimes has to do with the occurrence of the name Yahweh. So they would just be doing the same thing here. But again, you just can't tell based on what's there whether it's Yahweh or something else.
Or something else, yeah.
There's a number of places where they're saying we said things that we didn't say. The only word we said was uniquely Hebrew was Yah, Yod He Vav.
Okay, so let's take this a little bit further. So if the letters are there, the question is the significance of what they would mean. For instance, words such as El for God, Yahweh, the argument that Rolston and others have pushed back on is that they're not distinctively Hebrew, and they're common Semitic terms across various Semitic languages and, say, cultures. And the same with the word curse. So if this is a curse tablet from Yahweh, and the word Yahweh and the word curse aren't uniquely Hebrew, but are used. Okay, correct that.
No, they're agreeing with us that Yahweh is the only word that is uniquely Hebrew.
Okay.
But I'm saying that's what we said in the first place. So I don't know it's not even a point of discussion. That's what we said in the article. So they're saying we said something we didn't say, that the other words were uniquely Hebrew.
Okay, so break this down for us. So if the word Yahweh is uniquely Hebrew, and you both agree on that, then does it matter if the other words like curse are across different Semitic languages? It seems like that would be a secondary point, because we'd have Yahweh that is there, which is an early kind of old Hebrew. So first off, am I correct on saying that really it's going to hinge on the word Yahweh, not any of the other words when it's all said and done?
I would say yes. First. Second would be Arur, because if it does relate to Joshua's altar, Joshua's ceremony, then the Hebrew word curse, Arur, would be secondary.
Okay. All right. So is the debate over whether the word Yahweh is there? Like, can we talk about 48 letters? Is that one of the debatable ones? Is that one that's agreed on? That seems like the weight should be on that letter distinctly, that word.
Right. And fortunately, that is the more clear part of the inscription. And so in a follow-up publication, we will certainly zero in on that.
I certainly look forward to that, because I mean, as far as I'm aware, there is no willingness to accept that there's even letters on it in the first place. We keep coming back to this, right? Like not even a single, there's Rolston has said that he's, he might be convinced that one or two of the marks could be letters, but he's, as far as I can tell, he's not committed to accepting anything as a letter on the object as they presented it.
Gotcha.
So that case has not been really made publicly, and people have not been able to assess it yet. Is that fair in terms of the word Yahweh, or are people, at least other scholars outside your team, agreeing that the word Yahweh is there?
Oh, some are. Like I said,
Okay.
I don't know if they want their names used or not. That would be up to them.
Got a girlfriend in Canada.
But we presented it letter by letter, for example, Yod He Vav, and rather than showing the combined where they are together. And it's rather complicated. It's a small area. Some of the letters overlap. One very important point, Sean, that they ignored and didn't even address in these articles. There are bulges on many of the letters that from the inside out, they bulge through to the outside that reinforce the reading that we were giving to it on the inside. So
see, this is something from the original article that I read, from looking at all the scans. And I think I should add here too, in the immediate fallout after the publication of the article, Peter van der Veen on Facebook actually published a bunch of what he called were some of the highest quality images that they have of letters, and he mentioned this too of the bulges on the artifact, and people have looked at those and gone, yeah, sorry, I still see nothing. Like, and I think so. What he's saying is that I guess the impressions of the letters have been inscribed so deeply on the object that you can see evidence of them coming through on the outside surface. And to them, that indicates, well, that, this shows that somebody actually manually added these letters to the object, right? I think that's the argument that they're making. And they keep coming back to this, like, the bulges somehow bolster or reinforce this idea, but it's still, you still have to convince people that there's that you can even see the bulges there, right? Like, I am looking and I'm still going, I see nothing. And colleagues in the epigraphy community that I am in regular contact are still looking at this object and going, I don't see anything, and I'm not seeing the bulges. Or if I do see bulges, they sure don't seem significant to the reading and the interpretation of the artifact.
Yeah, and the presence of those bulges doesn't necessarily mean that writing went on, but perhaps that the indentation took place from within the inside of.
Right. It could be something inside there that caused. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Sure.
It could be sand. It could be anything.
All right. Did I miss anything in terms of your response?
Yes. Let me just point out a couple of things. There are a number of cases where I think they come across Rolston and Mayer as it is so because I say it is so. For example, on pottery, they say, well, the archaeological context does not point to LB2 when Stripling says that it does. The pottery that Stripling is saying does not continue down into LB2B and into the Iron Age 1 actually does. And then no citation, no parallels. I gave citations, I gave parallels, I made a statement, I backed it up. And I'm sure it's Mayer writing that because Rolston doesn't know pottery, but he just says it's not pottery because I say it's not, and that's not adequate. Secondly, they do the exact same thing with the scarabs. The scarabs cannot date to when Stripling is saying that they date. Sean, in our article, I cite the leading scarab expert in the world, Daphne Bentor. And Daphne agrees with me. And so they just give this cavalier dismissal, don't even address Daphne.
Yeah.
Let's say
I tried
something
looking
about the
for this
scarab
on his paper, and I couldn't really see what he was talking about.
in Stripling's paper about the scarabs, or in okay,
He
yeah,
makes mention of it, but the part that where the leading scholar agrees,
right.
I didn't see that.
Even let's say they're Bronze Age scarabs, right? Let's say the 13th century scarabs. It's a good way to provide like a terminus ad quo for a site, right? They're good for providing some approximations. But importantly, scarabs remain in circulation among people. They could remain in circulation for centuries. Like we have examples where and we also have commemorative scarabs as well, which were used oftentimes many years after the original manufacture of these scarabs. So I don't tend to put a ton of stock in using the specific scarabs to narrowly date the site to like 13th century, and that's it. It can only be here, right?
And isn't there also a tradition of maybe repurposing or rewriting or redecorating the scarabs? Or
well, the scarabs are really nice because they tend to be pretty specific to individual pharaohs, and there's piles and piles of them, right? So I don't know. I don't think the repurposing works in this sense.
now these they mentioned these because were they found in the dump piles, or is that why they're bringing them up? Like
Now,
part of the mix, or how
I would have to go back and look. I believe so, but yeah, that or they were. Yeah, I don't know if they found them in the dump piles or if that was part of Zertal's original excavation. It'd be weird. Yeah, no. Okay. Yeah.
At all. They just say it can't be so, essentially because we say it can't be so, because the original reading given by Baruch Randall, he said this. They don't. How can you not address the leading scarab expert in the world who agrees with me on that point? So again, it is so because we say it is so. On this issue of the mater lectionis, which is consonants being used as vowels, we get very much the same thing. It can't be so. And then Rolston cites himself on that. He's the expert. So he says it can't be so because in this book I said that it can't be so. I don't think that's fair.
Really? You don't think it's fair? Like, what did Rolston say about this, right? Like, so let's pull this up. And I'm gonna read the whole thing here. The consensus of the field is that matras lectionis. Now, so people understand Hebrew is a consonantal language, the script itself. So there are no individual letters that represent vowels. However, there are a handful of letters that can be used as vowels, and we certainly see this taking place later in time. So, and we call these matras lectionis is the plural, and maters lectionis is the singular. So here's what Rolston says. The consensus of the field is that matras lectionis are not attested in Iron Age Phoenician scripts, although in Punic inscriptions from much later periods, matras lectionis are sometimes used. Internal matras lectionis are attested in Old Aramaic and Hebrew. Since the authors of the Editio Princeps posit that this putative inscription is Old Hebrew, we will focus on the data regarding internal matras lectionis in Old Hebrew, drawing largely on Rolston's published work on matras lectionis that he published in 2006. For Old Hebrew inscriptions, there is no evidence for the use of internal matras lectionis to mark internal long vowels during the 9th, 7th BCE or the lion's share of the 8th century BCE. Okay, so basically what he's saying is that for the 9th and 8th century BCE, there's certainly nothing in the 9th century. There's no texts from the 9th century that contain matris lectionis. And he says the vast majority of texts from the 8th century also contain no matris lectionis, but there are just a small handful that possibly do. And then he provides a number of examples here. He continues a little later. He says, this evidence regarding the usage of internal matris lectionis in Old Hebrew inscriptions during the late 8th century BCE, and then some more frequent usage during the 7th century and 6th centuries BCE, is based on the totality of the orthographic evidence of several hundred clearly written Old Hebrew inscriptions. There is no usage of internal matris lectionis prior to this. The views articulated here are considered normative in the field and have been for over 3/4 of a century.
Wow.
So Rolston's just not saying this is so because I say so. Rolston is saying, I did extensive work on this in the past and published a book in which I cataloged every inscription from the 10th century, 9th century, all the way through to the 6th century. And the findings in that book demonstrate that there are no matris lectionis prior to the 8th century. He's not just saying it's because I said so. He's like, I happen to be the one who did the work on this, and here's the data. If you want to go check the data, go read my book. That is not what Stripling has accused him of.
Gotcha. So just so that I understand this better, are there any matris lectionis in his alleged?
Yes. Importantly, there are. I mean, Arur contains a matris lectionis, an internal matris lectionis, that vav.
So is that the
right?
aleph?
No, it's the vav.
Or the vav.
Right. It's making the oo sound.
The oo sound in the gotcha. So that seems rather inconsistent with something
in
that
my opinion, that's a bit of a like that this would be, again, I mean, there's already so many things about this that would be exceptional and essentially unique. But I mean, it's not even like maybe. So again, like just to sort of summarize what Rolston is getting at is he's saying we've surveyed all these texts from the 9th century through the 6th century, and we see this pattern of increased usage of matris lectionis, and importantly, nothing in the 9th century, then a trickle in the 8th, and then it continues to become more prominent in the 7th and the 6th. Okay, so you can see there's an increased usage. But nothing in the 9th. So, I mean, maybe if this was a 9th century inscription, you could say, oh, wow, we have an example here from the 9th century where we never had any. But no, it's not from the 9th. It's not from the 10th. It's not from the 11th. It's not from the 12th. It's from the 13th century, according to Stripling and his team. Yeah. So, no, just no. This is a pretty emphatic point against the text.
So it's an anachronism, basically, right? This sounds like this would have been
major anachronism.
A convention that just came later, and it's part of the evolution of the language.
Much later. Yeah.
So wouldn't have Peter Gerd known this when he saw those vavs and things like that? What do you think happened there?
I don't know. And it's possible that, I mean, so people will specialize in all sorts of different things. So I don't want to get down on him too much for missing something like this. I mean, it's possible that someone who specializes in epigraphy may not be as familiar with. So this is you're venturing into a slightly different field here. This is orthography, which is related to epigraphy. It's part of epigraphy, but it's not like, there's people who specialize in orthography too. So I suppose it's possible that he could have missed this. So but it does seem like a big problem. And importantly, this isn't Peter van der Veen speaking on this. This is Scott Stripling, right? We don't know what Peter has to say about this, and we also don't know. Maybe he's I don't know. We just don't know.
Scholarship either. And they're saying that most Ugaritic scholars would not accept our premise. Well, who gets to decide what is most? So in other words, some do, some don't. And, is that...
Are there any that do, Scott?
I know, right?
I'm like, be great if you could provide us with some names, or if there were some Ugaritic scholars who are happy to come out in support of the object. I haven't seen any yet.
I think that was one. The other is the straw man arguments, and I've pointed out a couple of those, and so I'll just leave that.
Like, honestly, that's just quibbling, right?
And to me, it sounds like he doesn't. Like, I don't see that as a straw man. When you straw manning, you're sort of like dumbing down someone's argument or misrepresenting
what they're saying to topple it, right?
These seem like objections.
Yes. And I mean, importantly, Rolston and Meyer have raised substantial objections that are legitimate and certainly not straw man arguments. So, I mean, even if you could find something that you could classify as a straw man argument, I don't think that invalidates some of the more substantive points that they have made in their response to Stripling and his team.
There, having already mentioned them, there are some inaccuracies like variation in letter size. They say, you can't have a variation in letter size.
That's not really what they say. Obviously, there's very often variation in letter size. The problem is the degree, right? Like it would be exceptional to see that kind of variation in letter size. I'm quite certain that's the point.
Citations, no parallels. So if you're going to make a statement like that, our feet are being held to the fire. I think there should be too. They're making statements that they're not backing up.
It's more like holding their feet to a Bic lighter, I think.
I know, and then the burden of proof here is on him.
It is.
Scholarly interaction regarding inscriptions normally results in a consensus, they say. Oh, really? What about the Kermit Kayafa Ostrakhan, which everyone thinks is the oldest Hebrew before this? There have been 11 alternate interpretations published since Garfinkel originally published it.
I believe, though, that so importantly, I don't think there's been any dispute about the fact that this is an inscription, right? Like, everyone agrees that these are letters on stone that were carved by a person. There's very few people who have come out publicly and said, yeah, when I look at the Mount Ebal lead curse tablet, I see text in there. That's a really important difference here. If we're drawing an analogy, right? And I also think too, I don't know this stuff well, but if I remember correctly, the disputes had to do with identifying a handful, like certain letters, and it had to do with assessing how the text worked. Like, could it be this letter? Could it be that letter? Because we're trying to make sense of how this forms a coherent text, which isn't always really easy. And we showed a picture of the lice comb, the object itself. When you look at, it's really, really hard to decipher the finer details of letters on a stone object or an ancient clay artifact or something, right? So those are the sorts of disputes that epigraphers get into. But usually they're all pretty widely agreed, at least that this is a text and not just a random jumble of striations.
Yeah. I mean, one thing is to have the disagreements on how to interpret, how to translate it properly. Another one is to have disagreements on whether or not they're actually letters.
There's anything there. Yeah.
Two different things.
So this is not at all uncommon to have disagreement. In fact, we expected it up front. They use the term Old Hebrew a number of times. I think that's a little ambiguous. What is Old Hebrew? Do you mean Paleo-Hebrew, like the language in which we have the manuscripts of the Old Testament? Right?
Stop. So he's making a pretty bad category mistake here. Paleo-Hebrew is a script, not a language. Hebrew is the language, and that's what Rolston and Meyer are talking about in that section of the article where they're talking about the matras lectionis and the orthography. Like, that's part of the language, right? It's not a script question so much as that's a Hebrew language question. So when they're talking about Old Hebrew, they're talking about the Old Hebrew language, which includes the orthography. Paleo-Hebrew is a script. Like, Dr. Stripling should know this.
So no one walked around speaking Paleo-Hebrew.
No. And in fact, Hebrew, Old Hebrew itself is a bit of a, like so many of these languages, there are multiple, we have a bunch of texts, inscriptions from the region, from Israel, from Moab, from Samaria, from Phoenicia, like Nabatea, so we have a bunch of these different inscriptions, and there are really fine differences between a couple of them to the point where you can say this is Moabite or this is Hebrew, but they're so close to one another. It all just looks like it's Canaanite, honestly.
Yeah, that's what I keep hearing.
Just slight variations on like a Canaanite language. And that's where Hebrew.
Would a similar analogy, and I know I can get in trouble by saying this, but would that be similar to like Latin and then Spanish, Italian, Portuguese?
I think they're
Closer?
probably even closer than that.
Gotcha.
Like they're really close. So yeah, and I'll just explain that too. When he does talk about Paleo-Hebrew, he's talking about what I call the Hebrew script or the Canaanite script. The Hebrew, as we recognize it, like what's behind me on my monitor here, what you read in your Hebrew Bible, that's actually a square Aramaic script that was adopted by the descendants, I guess, of the Israelites during the Persian period, and they incorporated it into their own literature, and that's basically how we ended up with Hebrew looking like it does today. So the old Canaanite script looks quite different, but it's the same language. It's exactly the same language.
Different script.
Yes.
Or are you referring to a proto-alphabetic sort of script? Because the grammar can be different in the two. Okay. So I think that's a point that should be thought about as well.
I think he's confusing categories again. Yeah.
And that's it.
Okay, that's great. So I've got a few more questions for you. Did they push back in any of these three articles in any way you said, you know what, I need to reassess this. Our team was wrong here. We should qualify our statements. In what ways have you guys reassessed after this public critique, if any?
Sure. I wish that we had done the outside before the inside. I wish we had put brackets around some more letters, which are fuzzy, to use their term. So I think some of these things that were brought out by them, we certainly would take into account.
I'm sorry. I'm just like, this is such small stuff. I mean, for such a withering critique, for him to come away and go, "Oh, I wish I had put some more brackets around some of my letters."
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's like we're talking about his science project.
These are quality scholars, and we want to glean from them whatever we can.
Okay, so it sounds like you're as confident as you ever were that the original release that you had about this inscription 200 years earlier still stands. Is that fair? Are you still...
that the script is proto-alphabetic, which would put it in the 13th or 14th century. LB2, in other words. Yes, I am. Do we have all 48 letters? Does it say what we're suggesting that it might say? I can't know that. That is the reading. I do think the core of it is there, and that it is in a proto-alphabetic script, and I do believe that the name Yahweh is there.
With some kind of curse. So the heart of your original claim still stands. So given that this is kind of outside scholarship, challenging certain assumptions that many people had, if you had to project in 10, 20 years, are you confident that scholars may start looking at this, assess it, and there could be kind of a monumental shift over time, as significant as like the historicity of David? Like that scholarship obviously shifted as finds were made. Do you see it as being that significant and potentially as powerful, or do you want to hold back a little bit and maybe not make such grandiose projections moving forward?
It's hard to have perspective when you're in the middle of it. And listen, I never even expected to find this. You have to understand. I was doing a boring methodological project on wet sifting to show what's being missed in dump piles from the past. Once we recovered this, we had a responsibility to process it and to publish it to the best of our ability. So that's what we've tried to do. I think our future might be like Zertal's past, in that you have an initial strong reaction, and with time, the pendulum will probably swing more toward the middle. There are some people who will never accept this because you can't see. I understand it's a tomographic scan. You can't see it. It's hard to accept. And I believe there will be many who will. I talked with Bill Deaver not long ago, and Deaver was very critical of Zertal. He said it wasn't an altar and so forth. Now, these years later, he's come around more to the middle, and this that it very well could be. And so, anyway, that's my opinion of what the future
I think that tends to be the general, like with regards to the site. Importantly, let's be clear here. I'm sure Bill Deaver didn't come around and say, I'm 50-50 on this curse tablet thing. He was saying I'm 50-50 on whether or not that's an altar on the other side of Mount Ebal that Zertal discovered. It might be, but I'm not 100% convinced, and I think that tends to be the kind of the scholarly position on this at this point. That scholars are like, maybe. And there's some other stuff at the site too, right? Like the animal bones, and there were a couple of other burn piles or smaller altar-looking installations sort of surrounding the platform. So I mean, like, but come on, like. At this point, as he's talking here, it reminds me of another scholar that I have been intensely critical of in the past while, who published a book back in 2012 arguing for a total reconstitution of early Christian history on the basis of the idea that Jesus was a fictional mythical character. And back then he was saying the same sorts of stuff. I expect a lot of resistance and pushback, but over time scholars will slowly start to come around, and eventually I'll be vindicated. Well, it's been like 12 years and the resistance to Richard Carrier's ideas is just as strong as ever, and nobody has come around. I remain gobsmacked that Stripling and his team see anything on this object. I remain absolutely astonished that they can't understand the pushback from scholars on this as to why no one's convinced. And it just, I don't know. Understanding, and I shouldn't be doing this. I don't like it when scholars do this. But given that Scott Stripling is a very, very conservative evangelical who teaches at a backwater seminary in a little town called Katy, Texas, that nobody except for Canadian football fans have ever heard of. And given the fact that he works for the Associates of Biblical Research, and given the fact that he got his PhD in archaeology from Veritas University, which is Norman Geisler's school, I can't help. Yeah. I can't help. I just can't help but remain skeptical about his motivations for this. Like, he's got strong motivations to be able to connect this site to the biblical Joshua. Strong motivations. How do you overcome that?
Okay, so 2 last questions. You raised concern about one of the editors for, at the beginning, the Israel Exploration Journal. Some people might say, Scott, you have publicly come out for this. You were drinking from a mug that had the curse tablet on it. Someone sent you a hat. You've been known for this. So now you have skin in the game, so to speak. And so now you would be biased towards accepting this and pushing it forward. How do you protect from that? Or would you say in archaeology, you're supposed to kind of plant your flag and just keep making the arguments until they've been drawn out. And then at some point you just go, all right, I've done my best to defend this thing. This is a worthy pursuit, but truth ultimately went out at the end of the day. No skin is lost.
We all have presuppositions, Sean. So let's not, and Mayer and Rolston sort of say maybe Stripling and Van der Veen are trying to support their view of something that's older. Maybe they're trying to support the Bible in some way. Hey, let's not make it like Stripling and Van der Veen are the only ones. Everyone comes to this with presuppositions and lenses, and then we're doing our best to be open-minded and deal with the evidence that exists. So I think I'm certainly capable of looking at all the evidence just like anyone else would be.
Appreciate what you're doing. Thanks for coming on.
Notice though that he wasn't. I was hoping he would come out and say, yeah, I do really have to guard against my own presuppositions taking over my. He didn't say that, did he? He just basically said, I could do this just as well as everybody else.
Yeah, which is a
little disappointing, honestly.
I think there's a name for that. It's an et tu quoque fallacy. Like, you too.
Yeah.
You too.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
The chance to have your response here. Did I miss anything you want to add or tweak about this story, or we covered it?
Well, let me just say in closing that this is an issue. It is an archaeological issue. It is not the issue. I published a lot of things in 2023. I published a 400-page volume on final publications of my previous dig with ArchaeoPress. I published in Jerusalem Journal of Archaeological Research, another peer-reviewed article. I have several peer-reviewed articles on a variety of topics. And so, this isn't that I am the curse tablet guy. Okay. This is some little side project. Okay. And it's fine. It's fine with me if other people have different, views and opinions on this.
Okay.
Let it breathe, and hopefully we'll all come to a consensus one day.
All right. Well,
we made it.
There's a danger there, right? Like, and I wonder if that's part of what he stuck that last little bit in there, just to remind everybody that, yeah, honest engine, I'm a serious archaeologist, because as good as you are, you can't control what you're going to be remembered for. And I think this probably a little bit more closer firsthand than some people. We were just talking about how you did your training in Greek under Daniel Wallace, who is a brilliant textual critic of the Greek New Testament manuscripts. But what is he going to be remembered for the rest of his life? Is that stupid 3rd century fragment from the book of Mark that he promoted as a 1st century manuscript. It's just how it goes. So, but I think that's all I got. You got anything more?
No, I'm just so thankful for you and your time and your expertise and your everything. Greatly appreciate you.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. It was super fun. This is great, Mark. Oh, yeah. You got something else?
No, thank you, Dr. Kipp.
All right.
Pleasure having you. Hopefully there will be more visits to come.
I look forward to it.
All right.
See you around, man.
Yeah.
Bye.
Now, folks, if you want to learn more from Dr. Davis, you can do this. You can do three things. The easiest one would be to subscribe to his channel, Dr. Kipp Davis, on YouTube, where he's got a ton of amazing videos there. My new favorite segment in YouTube, Diablo Critics, is featured in his channel. You want to check it out. It's a monthly live event with other scholars like himself. Number two, you can purchase his books on, Amazon. And number three, I want you to check out mvp-courses.com, where you can find his latest course titled Real Israelite Religions, Facts on the Ground and Propaganda in the Bible. For a very, very small fee of $49.95, you'll get access to 18 lectures, folks. A lot of great material there. So that's it. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Thank you, folks, for sticking around till the end. We do hope that you like and subscribe to our channel, and be sure to hit that notification bell for future episodes. And this has been Apostate of Mind.